The articular system is a complex network of joints that plays a vital role in our musculoskeletal system, allowing movement, stability, and flexibility. In this report, we will explore the different types of joints based on their tissue structure, including fibrous, cartilaginous, and synovial joints. We will also examine the various degrees of movement in joints such as synarthrosis, amphiarthrosis, and diarthrosis. Additionally, we will discuss anatomical movements and special movements that demonstrate the impressive range of motions our bodies can achieve. Fibrous joints are formed by the presence of fibrous connective tissue between adjacent bones. This tissue is dense, strong, and composed primarily of collagen fibers. Fibrous joints provide stability and limit movement between bones, acting as rigid connections. Cartilaginous joints involve the presence of cartilage between the bones. This cartilage can be hyaline cartilage or fibrocartilage. Cartilaginous joints allow for limited movement while providing structural support and shock absorption.
The synovial joint contains a joint cavity that is filled with synovial fluid, which reduces the friction during joint movement by lubricating the joint's cavity.
Synarthrosis joints are classified as immovable joints or joints with minimal to no movement. These joints are characterized by their ability to provide stability and strength to the skeletal system. One prominent example of synarthrosis joints is sutures. Sutures are fibrous joints that firmly unite the bones of the skull. The dense fibrous connective tissue between the skull bones holds them together, providing protection to the brain and maintaining the integrity of the skull. Amphiarthrosis joints are characterized by their ability to allow limited movement, providing flexibility and shock absorption while maintaining stability. Symphysis are amphiarthrosis joints that permit limited movement while offering strength through the presence of fibrocartilage.
Diarthrosis is also considered as the weakest type of joints because of its wide range motion. They are mostly found in the appendicular skeleton, and there are 6 types of diarthrosis joints. The first one is the planar joint. It is also known as the gliding joints because the bones where it articulates are flat, resulting in only gliding movement. The next one is the pivot joint. It is an articulation between the rounded end of a bone fitting into a ring formed by the other bone. Next is the saddle joint. It contains bones with concave and convex portions that fit together. It allows angular movements similar to condyloid joints. Next one, we have a hinge joint. It is similar to the hinge of a door because it can only be opened in one direction. One bone moves while the other remains stationary. And the next is the condyloid joint, which is also known as the ellipsoid joint. It is formed when the oval-shaped end of one bone fits into a similarly oval-shaped hollow of another bone. And the last type is the ball and socket joint. This type of joint is formed when a rounded ball-like end of one bone fits into a cup-like socket of another bone.
Anatomical movements. Anatomical movements in human anatomy refer to distinct actions that occur at various joints within the skeletal system. These movements enable mobility and contribute to the range of motion exhibited by the human body. This report explores 2 key anatomical movements: the gliding movement and the angular movement. Gliding movement involves the sliding of opposing flat or slightly curved surfaces of bones against each other in a simple and limited manner. For example, an illustration of the gliding movement can be observed in the carpal bones of the wrist. The intercarpal joints enable gliding movement. Let's talk about the angular movement. The angular movement occurs when there is a change in the angle formed between the bones at a joint. It involves various actions including flexion, extension, abduction, adduction, rotational movement, and circumduction. First is flexion. Flexion refers to the movement that decreases the angle between two bones, typically occurring in the sagittal plane. Second is extension. Extension is the opposite of flexion, increasing the angle between two bones.
An example of flexion is bringing your forearm closer to your upper arm, which decreases the angle between the two, and when you straighten your arm, the angle between the forearm and the upper arm increases, and that is what you call the extension.
Next is abduction. Abduction involves movement away from the body's midline, spreading body parts laterally. Next is adduction. Adduction is the movement towards the body's midline, bringing body parts closer together. Next is rotational movement. Rotational movement refers to the turning or pivoting of a bone around its longitudinal axis. Last but not the least, the circumduction. Circumduction involves the movement of a body part in a circular or cone-like motion.
Do you know that in articular system there are special movements? So let me discuss the special movements in articular system. First, I'm going to demonstrate dorsiflexion and plantar flexion, which are special movements involving the foot and ankle joint. Now, to help you understand this movement, let's break down the word dorsal. Refers to the back or upper side of something. Your toenails, for example, are on the dorsal side of the foot. In contrast, plantar refers to the sole or bottom of the foot. And flexion in anatomy just refers to a movement that decreases the angle between two surfaces. Now, let's put those words together and you will totally understand this movement. In dorsiflexion, the angle movement bringing the foot towards the shin, and the plantar flexion is the ankle movement pointing the foot downward. Third, I'm going to demonstrate inversion and inversion movement that turns the sole either toward the body's midline or away from the body's midline. During inversion, the bottom of the foot turns so that it faces toward the body's midline. The word evert literally means to turn outward, which is exactly what happened during eversion. Fourth, the position and reposition. In opposition, the movement of the thumb across the palm of the hand, while in reposition, the thumb returned to their original position. Fifth, the protraction and retraction. During protraction, the jaw is moving apart forward, while in the retraction, the jaw is moving backward. Lastly, the elevation and depression. During elevation, from the word itself, elevate means lift up or raise. The movement of the bone upward, such as shrugging the shoulder or lifting the scapula, while depression is lowering apart of moving the bone downward, such as after the shoulder are shrugged and the scapulae return to their original position.
And that's the end of our lessons. We hope you learned something informative. Thank you for listening.